So give yourself a few moments in the basic sitting posture, trying to sit right forwards in your chair for a few moments so that you get the feeling of support from your feet. As always, I'm not suggesting that you have to stay this far forwards. You may find it starts to impact your back, but it's good to start off like this if you possibly can, so that we have this foundation, this square with your feet and your hips at the corner. You're slightly forward, so you tilt your pelvis forwards about a third of your weight in your feet, and it means that the weight of your upper body can drop down through the, not quite through the middle, but through that square, and there's a kind of clear passageway down. But if your back starts to stiffen up, if you sit back a little bit, you won't get the same feeling in your feet, but it means that you won't be straining your back, which is a good thing. Rubbing your hands together and then tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Then onto one shoulder and your arm. On the other side. Upper part of your chest. And then your belly. Using these movements not just to physically warm your body up, which is part of its function, but to help you get that feeling of drawing your attention into your body. And this is both to have our attention to calm. The body is the sort of place that our thoughts go into, so drawing back from whatever else is going on around you, one way or another. But to also ensure that you are in your body. We're not trying to space out. We're not trying to let our thoughts go somewhere else. And that latter happens very easily. You start to relax and you think, yeah, maybe I'll go out for a walk this afternoon, or so-and-so's coming around tomorrow. I need to prepare for it. Just those little things, and you start to daydream and so on. So we're looking to feel that sense of stillness, calmness in body and mind in the present moment, if you like, rather than using some kind of imagery to take us on a guided journey, which can be a useful thing to do, by the way. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but it's not what we look to do in Tai Chi. So with whatever position is comfortable for you, as long as you feel that support for the upper part of your body, and just give this a little bit more consideration. See if you can get a sense for that area around your spine, the center of your back, almost like a kind of denser part, or maybe a column. Column is not quite the right word, but just some kind of quality within your body that is firmer, not stiff, not tight, but which will support the outer parts of your body. So we're going to get to a point where we don't feel the need to kind of hold our ribs up, hold our shoulders up. For whatever reason, we assume that we need to do that, but they can drop down and we won't just collapse. So we build some confidence in this idea of an inner structure and inner strength. And then when we begin to move, we try and move. So turning your head, trying to move in such a way that doesn't cause us to stiffen up again. So how we move is quite important here. We often just have the habit of straining to move, and in particular if you've had an injury or some kind of condition that's made movement difficult, even if that injury is long gone, the habit of straining to move may well still remain. And one way we can do that is we can see it very simply in this exercise. You turn your head one way, and the muscles on the outside, on the opposite side of the way that you're turning, will extend out. This is what muscles do. And then they'll reach a point where they'll start to contract. And what we don't want to do is to try and push them past that point. And that's especially important in our neck, but it's important with all of the movements. So the principle is that we're aware of what's going on in the body, we're listening to the body, and we can detect those moments when it starts to stiffen up. Hands in front of your shoulders. Same thing. I can go back to about here and it's fine. I can feel a little bit of pressure in my back, but nothing uncomfortable. As soon as I go back further, I get that tightening. So this gives me an idea of my range of movement. And within that range of movement, my movements just become more fluid. And I'm not adding to the strain. So in the first instance, at least, we want to get away from the idea that we're trying to extend our range of movement moving forwards. It's not that we don't want to do that, it's just that we don't want that to be the prime focus. Your range of movement will increase because this way of moving helps to disperse stiffness and tightness in your body. But have as your primary intent in some ways, in terms of movement, a fluidity of movement, however far that may actually be. Hands out to your sides. Excuse me. Rotating your arms. And then round. And if in the process of doing this, you do sort of encounter one of those areas that is quite difficult, you know, I mean, and it could go back a long way. It could go right back to sort of childhood or teenage years. Maybe you broke an arm or something like that. And so we naturally try to protect those areas by tightening up, by stiffening up. Back the other way. So recognize that. Don't sort of get frustrated with it. Just look to this quality of movement with a kind of massaging element to it to help just ease those areas and rest. Now, using your hips and your feet to move your body. So this is very helpful for helping us to work creatively with those areas that are resistant to the movement in the upper body. So again, you know, if there's a problem with your back or your shoulders, rather than trying to move in those areas, let the transfer of your weight from your hips to your feet and back, the push down through your feet, push down through your hips, the pull through your hips as you go back, like somebody's pulling you back into the chair, all work together to move your upper body for you. And it's still an effort in the upper part of the body, but the effort is to sustain the posture, to create an environment of spaciousness within which the movement is more likely to flow. And this principle that movement comes from the lower body is a key one in Tai Chi. Standing, that can be quite difficult, particularly if you've got a dodgy knee or you haven't quite got the posture and you feel a bit unstable. So in some ways, it's more accessible to us, but in the chair-based parts of the classes. On the other hand, it's more subtle the way that we use our feet and our hips. It's the use of our feet and legs is very obvious when we're standing because we're standing on them. Whereas here, it's very easy to overlook them. So you're training your attention to notice really quite subtle details. Turn in slightly. So you can now go more towards one leg. So within these very simple opening movements that we make, and once again, there's it's like a physical element here where working with different joints, different parts of the body, looking to soften them, to loosen them, mobilize them. But at the same time, we're bringing our attention into our body and just trying to establish, awareness once again. This kind of operating method in Tai Chi, the way that we move, the factors that are involved in there. And then turning the other way. That's always going to be an easier process with a simpler movement. The more complex, the more challenging the movements become, the more we want to rely on that awareness, what's happening within the body and how it can happen, but also the more likely we are to lose that awareness. And then winding around. There's various things to take into account. We want to use our legs, our hips, and the movement of the weight. We want to be aware of how far we can move. So, for instance, how far your head can move without losing that sense of alignment. So if I go to here, I can sort of rest in my hip on that side, my hip on my leg. So yeah, I'm okay. But if I go out to here, now I can feel a pull developing in the side of my body. Changing direction. Moving from the center of your body, hips and pelvis. Have a feeling of your pelvis just rolling around like a ball rolling around in a small space. Sometimes if you watch a pool or billiards match, snooker, something like that, or golf, anything that involves a ball going down a hole, then you'll sometimes see the ball kind of at the top of the hole, and it will rock around or it will spin a little bit before it drops. The hole again is that area defined by your feet and your hips. And just coming to rest more centrally. Once again, maybe shift to one side so you can move one foot, step out, and back. Notice how you're using this other leg. As I go to lift this leg, I push down a little bit through the foot that's still flat on the floor. And on the other side, move across a little bit. A little shift across to take most of the weight out of your foot, making it easier to step. So now, hands down by your side, back to this rotating movement combined with the transfer of the weight. So we start to put together different elements of these movements now. And those basic principles, basic elements of the movement. Turn your hands palm forwards. Arms hanging straight out from your shoulders. Going forwards and rotating. Move your weight back and rotate your arms. From the side, you can see my arm hanging directly down from my shoulder. I'm not trying to move it forwards and backwards. But we make the change into fisherman castanet. I can't use both arms because of the back of the chair. We leave that hand facing backwards. I move back, and it's as though somebody has hold of my arm and then releases it. And same thing going forwards. It's that my wrists and my fingers are quite soft. And because of that slight delay, we feel various things happening through our arm and our chest and our upper back. They all contribute to the movement. Chest opens and then contracts. And we feel that pull across our back, which then contracts. So like with the earlier movements, we feel this alternating expansion and contraction. And gradually through that, the movement of the weight, our arms begin to swing further. So we're not, and I've really emphasized this, we're not getting to here and then going, right, I'm going to try and get to there. If you want to get to there, then you have to move more in the front of your body. And obviously, that can be quite difficult. It's like riding a bike. You ride a bike, and you want to go faster. It's not simply a case of sort of leaning your head further forwards, because sooner or later you're going to fall off if you do that. You actually use your feet. You pedal faster. And I emphasize that because we do have a natural tendency to let our attention gravitate to our arms and our hands. And so we tend to overuse arms and hands and the upper body in general. This is true for all of us, I think. And then we start to lose the connections in the body. So we're constantly reminding ourselves, one way or another, of the significance of our feet and our hips and our weight transfer in the movements. Now, rolling the ball in. So we're told, one of the old writings in Tai Chi, that the movement is rooted in the feet, that dropping of our center of gravity, transmitted through our legs, and we can feel the weight moving through our legs from front to back, foot to hip. Controlled directly through the center of the body, between hips and waist, looking forwards. The movement is forwards, backwards, and expressed in the arms. Now, turning your hands palm in, pigeon spreads its wings. It's not that we don't use the upper part of the body, but we can feel very clearly here, I think, that the pigeon spreads its wings, what's happening in our chest and ribs, in our belly. There's this expansion followed by a contraction. And it's almost like there's a ball or a balloon there that somebody's pumping up, pushes your arms out, and then the air is released and the hands can come back in comfortably. And then bringing your hands in towards your hips, your elbows will go out slightly, push and wave. Again, we are establishing in these early, very simple exercises, principles and understandings of the way that we move and our posture, subtle elements that will be present in all the movements. But the choreography for the movements at the moment is very straightforward. I think complicated going on. One more time. And then hands down in front of your hips. A loose fist, meaning that you should be able to get a finger down through the middle of your rolling fingers and punch with both hands. The rotation is at most 180 degrees. Here, palms of your hands facing upwards, and here down towards the floor. Up to that much. This time, from the forward position, just open your fingers, turning your hands out, winding them back, and back to the press in. Again, with your chest opening as you bring your hands out, and chest contracts, and that helps to bring your hands in. Upper back, more expanded now, and then the upper back contracts. So again, we have this interplay between what we might think of as opposite sides of the movement. And this is how the human body moves. This is how our muscles work. One set of muscles will contract, make a movement, say maybe your arm flexing or something like that. And the other muscles on the sort of the outside, as it were, of that movement allow the movement to happen, not tighten, say here, and, you know, your triceps, tighten your biceps. One more time. Coming back and turn. Nice smooth feeling still through your back and spine. And just see whether as you let your arms extend a little bit, that changes. If you overextend them, you'll get that sort of sense of gripping once again. Bringing your hands in. Turn them palm up. So we're using your feet and your hips with a gentle push downwards, which pushes your arms up. This time, turn your hands palm down, trigger, shoulders dropping down, your back sort of shortening, the weight of your head pressing down into your belly as though there were a ball there. And then see if you can get a sense for the ball expanding and then being compressed. I said earlier that we trained our attention to recognize this alternating movement between expansion and contraction, or contraction and expansion, in yin and yang, if you like. To just recognize, we want to recognize that in the muscles, but it's more than just muscular. And we feel the same thing here. Compression, expands. Compression, and expand. So the very act of yielding, of allowing our weight to drop, feeling the weight of the head passing down through the center of the body into our legs and hips and buttocks, will initiate a process that leads to the expansion upwards. Like bouncing the ball. To bounce a ball, you have to let it drop first. One more time. extending your hands out. Wild goose. So it's the downward movement that creates the potential for the upward movement. A lot of emphasis in on this yielding quality, yielding to the pull of gravity, allowing gravity to move through your body to draw your head down, draw your shoulders down a little bit, and then feeling the expansion. Out in the clouds. Hands crossed in front of your knees. You sit back, sink down into your hips, and expand upwards. Legs get slightly compressed, and again, they spring back up. You've got an image for the running blades that the para athletes use, these curved fiberglass or something similar, and they then expand and push your shoulders up. Or you remember, I can't remember what they were called. There used to be a thing where you had boots with springs on and you could bounce up and down. Or like a pogo stick, drop down onto the pogo stick before it pushes you up. So that yielding quality, that energy that we call you in Tai Chi, you could argue is the sort of source of all the movement. It's the first thing that we look to do. Once we've started, of course, then it's a cycle rather than a linear reaction between expansion and contraction. Because similarly, as you expand, you reach a point where your arms are going to come down. This time, don't go forwards, but let your hands drop down by your sides. Feel that sense of compression on one side. Just focus on that. It's almost like this is happening. It isn't what's happening because your body stays straight. And then there's this. Again, this is really exaggerated. It's a very subtle feeling within your body that moves your arm for you. And then you feel that again as your arm comes down. We move our attention across to the other side. And the same thing, expanding movement and a contracting movement. Dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Now both hands together. So one of the key movements, you could call it, is one that you can't really see happening unless it's exaggerated, but it's this feeling of compression and release, expansion and contraction, opening and closing. There's various ways of describing it that can vary between person and person, but also here perhaps it's good to think of your back extending and contracting. In other movements you might want to use a slightly different image, but overall this is the constant kind of dynamic from yin, the movements that are more about drawing into the body, the yang, the ones that extend out from the body, from the center to be precise. And the movement between what we think of as yin and what we think of as yang is the one that gives the sense of energy to the whole practice. This time extend one foot, scooping the sea and looking at the sky. Gently as you go forward, with a very strong feeling of your hips dropping back. And that will be the limiting factor, because what you don't want to happen is, I can get to about here today, I go a little bit further. Now I can feel my back and my belly constricting, tightening. I don't want that to happen. And then grasping the tiger's ears. So by not moving into those areas where there's a gripping, where there's a tightening, we maintain a sense of space within the body. In practice, it means we're probably moving to about 80% of the full movement possible from the outside. And that maximizes the potential for a flow movement within the body. Grasping the tiger's ears. Try that on the other side. Scooping the sea and looking at the sky. This knee, incidentally, is slightly curved. Don't lock the knee out. You will get a little bit of a stretchy feeling in your calf and in your hamstrings and probably up through your back as well. That's quite nice. It's not the main purpose of the exercise, which is really to explore what happens when our pelvis tilts forwards and when our hips drop back, how that affects our shoulders and our arms. And any kind of stretching would still leave a little bit of space in the body. What I think of as a soft stretch. And then changing. Grasping the tiger's ears last time. And then just bringing your feet back. So if we apply those ideas to a more complex movement, and we'll do part of the Wild Horses Men, and I've been doing that a lot recently, is to have you become familiar with that. You drop your weight back into your right hip, and again, we get that sense of a compression, and it will start to push back. And once it starts to push back, then we direct the movement towards the opposite leg and come back on the same line. We move our weight across. We feel that movement downwards through the hip. We feel the push forwards going towards your right leg. There's even a moment of settling here in the right leg. And then back. Turn and move across. So this is the basic weight change pattern, the part the Wild Horses mane. And then by turning in the pelvis here, we move our weight across to the left, and we can join up those two movements. Come into your right hip. Hold the ball with your right hand on top. Part the Wild Horses mane. So as we rest here, we wait for that feeling of a push back and let that draw arms across. Hold the ball, move across. And just to remind you of that feeling of pulling on your arms when we did Fisherman Cast a Net. And although the pattern is different, a little bit more complex perhaps, so it's not exactly the same, but it's the same idea. I start to go back and I feel this arm being pulled back. And again, this is a very fundamental dynamic. Exactly what our arms do is very difficult to nail down because it will vary from movement to movement, but the principle will remain the same. The yang, the yin in the upper part of the body. One more to each side. Let your hands come to rest for a moment. A couple of slow, gentle breaths. Again, there's a rhythm there of expansion and contraction. Shoulders dropping down, rib cage dropping down. Just aware of that inner framework, however you think about it. The skeleton is clearly a part of that, your spine, the pelvis, the bones of your legs. But it's not a hard and fast division. It's not like you've got soft tissue and then hard tissue. It's more a sort of spectrum going across. And you know, if you can imagine getting something like a balloon and holding it in one hand and pushing your finger in from the other side, then it will be fairly easy to start off with, but the resistance will get stronger and stronger. But it would remain soft, it would remain elastic. So rather, I started you off by saying, yeah, you've got an inner structure and an outer structure. It's a good starting point, but like a lot of things in Tai Chi, we get to a stage where we think, oh, it's not really like that. No, that's not an anatomical description. That's an idea to work with. And so, with all of these principles, my experience is that we eventually leave them behind, and that doesn't necessarily mean we never come back to them, and it doesn't make them bad images. It's just that they've got us to a certain point, and it's like going out for a walk, and there's a hill, and you walk up the hill, and then it looks like sort of like there's an abrupt end there because all you can see is the crest of the hill. But as you get to the top, you realize, oh, there's a whole area out there. You didn't know that until you got to the top of the hill. So it doesn't invalidate the walk up the hill by any means. Doesn't mean you might stroll up the hill again at some point. Just that you've got to a point where you think, oh, now I can consider what else is here in front of me. So once again, rubbing your hands together. Patting over your face. Over your head and neck. And then your shoulder and your arm. And on the other side. And upper part of the chest. And belly. And your legs. Pushing your heels up. And then circling around, just get the blood energy flowing through your legs again before you stand. And back the other way. Okay, and then standing. So with all of these ideas and images, models that we use, we want to be prepared to use them when they're appropriate and just gently put them to one side when they're not actually helping. So going to do a little exercise. I don't often get around to doing these in the seated classes, and I really should do. It's a matter of time as much as anything else. The standing position should have the same qualities as the seated position. Obviously, you're using your legs more, so the space that you've got for your weight to drop is smaller, but it feels the same when it happens. And you want your weight a little bit forward. I'm exaggerating. There is a slight angling of the body here, but the pivot point is from your ankles. It's not your hips. And then you let your hips drop back. So once again, we come to a seated position. We sit into our legs. Unlike the seated posture, it's upright here, shoulders in line with the hips, and then thinking about that image of a column going up through your body again, just start to turn in your hips. It's like a wheel spinning around its axle, or the image I rather like is it's like a weather vane just blowing gently in the breeze. Your arms feeling quite heavy, and you can see my shoulders. I come a bit closer. See the angle, the slope of my shoulders. I'm not trying to do this, and it's very difficult to get a sense of your arms just hanging there. We feel as though we should do more, but in fact, what will happen here is, you see where my hands are falling? What I'm not trying to do is this. I'm not trying to place them. They will fall there quite naturally. Fortunately, we're all pretty much the same. And when you look at it from the back, you see where my hand falls across the spine here. And ideally, when we do this, when the arms strike the body gently, it's a bit like, there's a resonance, a bit like hitting a drum. And just above where your hand strikes at the rear, in the small of your back, there's an acupuncture point called the gate of life. Now, some people will do this. They'll actually lift their arm up to strike that area. But I tend not to do that, because I think when you do it properly, you still get the vibration going up through your back to that point. And so the exercise is sometimes referred to as knocking at the gate of life. So this is a good exercise to do in the morning. It's very gentle. You build it up slowly. You start off quite small, but eventually you can build the momentum up. It's got a gentle aerobic quality to it. You know, your heart will start to beat a little bit faster. Your body will warm up, so that's a good thing. It shows us how we can use the movement in the center of the body to move our arms, because a certain amount of momentum will build up. And that momentum is very useful, because momentum is, you know, you could, if you're thinking about energy, the energy comes from the center of the body to move your arms. That's quite difficult to feel going slowly. But when it's a bit faster, we've got that sense of momentum there. Those connections in the body can become a little bit clearer. So it's quite a good exercise to practice. But now just let your arms drop down. So that's knocking at the gate of life, or loosening. As I say, I don't always get time in the seated classes to do all of those, but it's a very simple exercise. If you want to see more of them, incidentally, then take a look at the recordings of the standing classes, because I always start my standing classes with these exercises, and you'll see there's a few variations, and I think the class I recorded yesterday, which will go up on YouTube soon, I did a longer session of those, so there's a whole variety of them. So just take a look at the recording of that, and that will give you a few extra exercises that you can do. They are great. This is how I start my morning practice. I always do a selection of these exercises at the start of the day, and even if I'm having a day off and I'm not doing much in terms of practice, I always do something like that to prepare for the day. Now just standing, sinking down and pushing up, and see if you can just recall that sense of connection between what's happening in your hips and hence your legs, and how that moves your arms for you. And this is a very fundamental thing in Tai Chi. And if you can take that into the seated exercises, I would say that's quite an advanced thing. I think the seated exercises, it's a lot less obvious how we're using our legs and even our center. So it's very easy with the seated exercises to just follow what the arms are doing. One of the reasons I often say that I think in many ways the seated exercises are more subtle than the standing. Now, change to the wild goose. And then just let your arms drop down. Put one foot forwards and just begin to transfer your weight from one foot to another. Feel the weight of your arms hanging from your shoulders. They should feel quite heavy. They are quite heavy. It's just that we quite often do this as though we're trying to stop our arms falling off or something like that. But that's never happened in any of my classes yet. So going back to that earlier exercise, the swinging one, my first teacher, Bronwyn, often used to say, imagine you're doing it with a heavy shopping bag in both hands. So you're less inclined to lift up. I'm going to come forwards a little bit. Now, this time, as you transfer your weight, just let your body turn. Ideally, you will turn in the direction that your foot is pointing. But if you find that it's easier to turn the other way, that's fine for the moment. And then, once again, just speed the movement up a little bit. And notice how my arms are now swinging. I didn't try to move my arms. I didn't stand here and go, oh, I've got to do this. It was as the momentum again builds up. And I'm going to remind you of this in a few moments when we come to do Wind Blows the Willows. So you may know that exercise, but if you think about it, you've got the same mechanisms going on, the same sense of energy moving through the body. It's just a little bit faster, and hence again, a little bit more obvious. And then just let the movement die down and go back to doing it straight forwards and backwards. And this time, when you get to the back foot, raising your toes, front foot turns out slightly into the front foot, push your knee forwards to raise your heel. Stepping in. and on the other side. So first of all, trying to keep looking straight ahead or maybe just slightly angled out, feeling the transfer of your weight. And then starting to slowly turn. I'm going to bump into the wall there. I don't want to do that when I'm moving quickly. And just beginning to let the movement build speed. But what's happening in your arms? Again, they're swinging around. Just be aware of the muscles in your arms, like the big radial muscle here, whichever one it is, but it's attached to your bones at either end, but in the middle it's quite soft. So as your arms swing around, there's a very slight gentle drag there, not an uncomfortable one, but it's like it's just pulling slightly as you go forward. Whereas if you're using your arms like this, then you won't get that. And you may feel that down into your fingers, up into your shoulders and your back as well, because we've got the speed, we've got the momentum. Good. And then go back to the slower movement, raising the toes and the heel. But as you do this, can you still feel those same qualities in your arms and your back? We don't have to go fast to feel that. We can feel it more easily when we go fast. But now that we've got an idea of what that means, how that feels, we can maybe start to feel it with the slower movements. Starting to step. And then stepping through. And back in the other direction. So if I were to take this movement here and maybe turn the other way, then I could very quickly get to this, which is of course a faster version of Windblows the Willows. We're not going to do it fast, but again, we've used an idea and we've sort of discovered something, and now we can move it across and we can put it within the context of the slower movement. So sink your weight back, turn towards the front foot. Wind blows the willows. Okay, try that with your left foot forwards, sinking back and turning. Remember that feeling if you were able to find it in your arms and your back. Have the intent to have that feeling. And as always, particularly doing something like Tai Chi, our bodies do get very good at following intent. Turning your front foot out a little bit and forward, bring the back foot through, and dragonfly skims the water. You may find, if you're not straining so much in arms and back, shoulders, that you're more stable as you do this. It's not inevitable, you'll still have the odd little wobble, but the tendency will be for you to be less top heavy. And then stepping back, dragonfly skims the water. Good, and bring your feet back. Lovely. Go back to your chair. So, just a slightly different routine. In some ways, as I say, I always run out of time. There's always more to teach. But those swinging exercises are very simple. I'll try and do the initial one a little bit more often. I won't do it in every class. But as I say, they are very useful exercises. Well, just a little bit. They have a mild aerobic quality, so can be good all around. Worth doing first thing in the morning, you know, as part of your early morning routine, both for the physical effect, the aerobic effect, and so on, but also because they're very much Tai Chi. They're very much things that illuminate certain things that we're trying to find within the slow movements of the Tai Chi and Qigong exercises. So now, let your arms drop down. Embrace Tiger, return to Mountain. Pushing your arms out, maybe with that same quality in the muscles of your arms, that slight sense of what I describe as a drag. Not really a very good way of describing it, but I haven't got a better word. And then just settling down. Again. This time let your arms come to rest. And once again, just see if you can feel the weight of your arms dropping down through your legs. Just reassure yourself they're not going to go anywhere. So see if you can really feel. It's quite difficult to do that. We habitually hold our arms and shoulders very tight, I think, most of us. Sitting quietly, feel your weight going down through your hips and your feet. A couple of slow, gentle breaths. And just open your eyes. Lovely, that went very quickly. Thank you very much, everybody. I do always seem to run out of time in classes. It's a vast world, Tai Chi, so there's much more that we could do at any particular time.